My name is Veda Marsh. I'm 30 years old, and I'm a paralegal at a two-attorney firm in Clover Falls, Indiana. 2 years after my sister left for Chicago with the man she'd been hiding from me for 6 months, the two of them drove back into our parents' driveway on a Thursday afternoon. My sister stepped out of the passenger side, looked me over the way she used to look at shoes that weren't quite right, and said, "Still living at home, Veda? I figured you'd have moved on by now." Then Trent, her husband, my former fiancé, came around the hood and laughed. "The town hasn't changed. But you look tired, babe." He caught himself on the last word. Or maybe he didn't. And then my father, who hadn't raised his voice since the early 2000s, set down his iced tea and said, "Good. You're both here. We need to talk about your mother." Something shifted across their faces. Not guilt yet, calculation. The next hour and 20 minutes ended a business license, changed a will, and forced me to decide what kind of daughter I actually wanted to be. And what my father pulled from the cabinet behind his desk was still not the part that undid me. Welcome to Peaceful Drama Stories, where the quietest people in the room turn out to have been paying the closest attention. If you find yourself in stories about patience, loyalty, and the kind of justice that doesn't make noise, stay a while. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and subscribe, because you'll want to be here when that cabinet opens. To understand that Thursday afternoon, I have to take you back 2 winters. I was 28 and engaged to Trent Hollis, 4 years together, 2 of them with a ring. And I thought the hardest thing happening in our family was my mother's diagnosis. Rowena Marsh, 61 years old, retired kindergarten teacher, the woman who could read a room the way some people read books. Parkinson's. Caught early enough that the neurologist was still talking about years of good quality life. Late enough that she'd been hiding the tremor in her left hand under the table at dinner for almost a year before she told us. My father, Holt Marsh, spent 33 years as a thoracic surgeon in Indianapolis before he retired to Clover Falls. When Mom got the diagnosis, he did what surgeons do. He made a plan. My grandfather had left us a hunting cabin up in Brown County. Dad sold it, added most of their accessible savings, and put $280,000 into a dedicated account. My mother's care fund. Enough, he said, to cover anything she needed and still leave us the house. Here's the part that still tightens something behind my sternum. Trent was there when Dad set it up. Sat right there at the kitchen table with his laptop open, walking my father through the account structure, because Trent knew money the way my father knew a chest cavity. Clean, methodical, confident. And my sister Giselle, the eldest, the organized one, the one who had lived in 4 cities in 7 years and always landed on her feet, became the trustee. It made sense then. I was working full-time, she was between jobs, and Trent was family. 6 months later, Trent was not family anymore. I came home early from a deposition prep one evening and found a text on his phone. Not snooping, the thing lit up face up on the kitchen counter, from a contact saved as G with a star. The message didn't need context. It had been going on since August. I was reading it in November. Giselle lived in Indianapolis then, 40 minutes away. I did what my legal training had conditioned me to do before I did anything else. I photographed the screen, twice, checked the timestamp, set the phone back down. Then I sat at the kitchen table for a very long time without touching anything. The engagement ended that night. Giselle never apologized, not in any form I could recognize. What she said, over the phone 2 days later, was, "Veda, these things happen between people. You and Trent weren't right anyway. You have to see that." Then she and Trent moved to Chicago, and the subject closed the way a wound closes. Wrong, but sealed. My family's response was the second injury, and in some ways the longer-lasting one. My mother sat across from me at her kitchen table, held both my hands in her trembling ones, and said, "Please don't make this ugly. I can't lose Giselle too." She was still in the early stages then, still herself, which made it worse, somehow. She knew exactly what she was asking. My father said very little, which I interpreted at the time as grief, and later understood completely wrong. I stayed in Clover Falls. I rented a duplex 8 minutes from my parents' house and told myself it was practicality. But the first time Mom got confused on a Tuesday morning and called my cell 4 times in 20 minutes because she couldn't find her medication, I stopped lying to myself about the reasons. I was there because she needed someone there. It became my week, Monday through Friday at the firm, Tuesday evenings at my parents' house, alternating weekend mornings, plus every call that started with, "Your mother is asking for you." I learned her pill schedule, her sleep patterns, which shoes had Velcro so the laces didn't trip her, which chairs she could get out of independently, and which ones she couldn't. I kept a log because keeping a log is what you do when you're the only one reading the chart. Date, time, what happened, who was present. A paralegal's habit. The fund paid for real things in the beginning. A physical therapist who came Wednesdays. A home health aide named Rosa who worked Monday and Friday mornings. Grab rails in the bathroom. A shower seat. Requests went through Giselle's system and reimbursements came back with little smiley faces in the memo line. Then, about 14 months in, I was opening the mail at my parents' house and found a bank statement Dad had left on the counter. One line caught my eye: Vantage Home Care Partners, Care Coordination Services, $2,100. I read it twice. I had been in that house 4 days that month. There was no Vantage. No binder, no lanyard, no van, no coordinator who had ever once called me. And care coordinators always call the family member doing the hands-on work. I showed my father. He looked at it for a long moment, folded the paper in half, and said, "I'll look into it." The next month, the charge came back, $2,350. That night I added a column to my care log. In it I wrote one line: "No coordinator present today." Let me tell you what that stretch of 2 years actually looked like from the inside, because it wasn't dramatic. It was Tuesdays. I'd come at 9 with something from the bakery on Elm, whatever Mom liked that week, and we'd sit at the kitchen table while I helped her with her morning routine. Parkinson's takes the fine motor things first, or it took them first in my mother. Buttons, zippers. The clasp on her watch. She hated being helped and she let me anyway, which was a kind of trust I didn't have a word for. We'd talk, or she'd talk and I'd listen, or we'd just sit together with the radio on. In the second year, she started losing threads mid-sentence. Not often, but it happened. One morning she caught herself, laughed a little, and said, "I'm losing my words, Veda. Your father keeps them all, though. He never forgets a thing." I thought she meant it as a compliment about his memory. I didn't understand what she was actually telling me for months. Meanwhile, 2 hours north, my sister was living a different kind of life. I wasn't looking, but small things found me. A mutual cousin mentioned a trip to Napa. Someone from high school liked a photo of Giselle at what appeared to be a charity gala in a dress I recognized as expensive. And once, under an old photo of our family at Brown County, the last summer before the cabin sold, she posted a caption, "Missing our happy place." The cabin that had been sold to pay for the care she was billing, though I didn't know the full extent of that yet. Things shifted in January. My phone rang at 11:40 on a Tuesday night. A Clover Falls police officer, very calm, telling me they'd found my mother on Birchwood Road, a quarter-mile from the house, in 26-degree weather, in her bathrobe and one slipper. She'd gotten up while my father slept and gone outside looking for the school where she'd taught for 22 years. The school had closed in 2019. The ER kept her until morning. She was fine, cold, disoriented, but humming to the triage nurses by 5 a.m. I was not fine. My father had the door alarm installed and a motion sensor light on the back porch by noon the next day. Because surgeons do not repeat a preventable outcome, her neurologist used the words we'd been circling. Memory care. Not yet, but within the year. We should be looking now. I did what I do. I made a spreadsheet. I visited 3 facilities and found one that didn't feel like a waiting room. Greenbrier. 25 minutes away, secured garden, a music therapist who ran a Wednesday afternoon session, staff who spoke to residents at eye level. There was a room on the memory care wing with a window that looked out onto a courtyard, maple. Mom stood at that window during the tour and went still in a way that told me this was the one. Greenbrier had two things, though: a wait list and a price. $8,200 a month. Terrifying until you remembered that Dad had planned for exactly this. $280,000 minus 2 years of legitimate care expenses should have left somewhere around $220,000. More than enough. For the first time in months, the math held still. I emailed Giselle, subject line, Mom, Greenbrier deposit. Clean and factual, the way I write anything I might someday need to show a judge. Room available. Deposit $9,000. Deadline 3 weeks out. Please confirm transfer from the care fund. I watched the little checkmark appear. 1 day passed. 2 days. On day 3, she posted a photo from what appeared to be a rooftop bar. On day 5, I got my answer. Hey, haven't had a chance to sit with this. Big decisions like this shouldn't get rushed over email, you know? Let's all talk when Trent visit next month. Mom deserves that conversation in person. 2 purple hearts and no dollar amount. The deadline was in bold in my original email. She knew it. So I drove to Clover Falls Savings on my lunch break and asked what it would take to get the deposit transferred or my name added to the account. The woman at the desk was kind about it. Policy was policy. I wasn't on the account. Changes required both account holders in person, same day, with ID. I drove home, sat in my car for a while, then went inside and asked my father flat out to add my name. He was at his desk with a crossword. He didn't look up right away. When he did, there was something in his face I read as exhaustion. Not yet, he said. Give me a few more weeks. A few more weeks. From the man whose answer to the vanishing $2,100 had been, I'll look into it. I stood in his study doorway and did something I had never once done in my adult life. I ran out of patience with my father. Weeks until what, Dad? He filled in an answer on the crossword. Until they're sitting in my house, he said. The Monday after that conversation, Greenbrier called. The maple window room was going to another family if we couldn't hold it. I went back to the desk. I slid my own debit card across. Hold the room, I said. My mother is coming. The woman processed it without comment, which was the most compassionate thing anyone did for me that whole month. That weekend, something changed in my father. He asked me to stay for dinner Sunday, and then, after Mom was settled for the night, set a mug of tea in front of me and started asking questions with a precision that reminded me of a deposition. Which Monday was I last at the house? Did Vantage ever send paperwork? Had a coordinator ever called me directly? I answered each one honestly. He nodded and said nothing more. On the way out, I noticed the door to his study was ajar, and the oak cabinet behind his desk, the one I'd assumed held old financial files and medical journals, was open a crack. I didn't go in, I went home. 10 days before the visit, I spent one evening with a search bar and my legal training. The Illinois Secretary of State website maintains a public business registry. It took 11 minutes to find Vantage Home Care Partners LLC, registered 20 months ago. Managing member, Giselle Hollis. I sat at my kitchen table and looked at that for a long time. Then I pulled out 2 years of my care log and went back through every month. Vantage appeared on statements I'd seen or heard referenced. I cross-referenced. 11 days when a coordinator was supposedly on site. 11 days when my log read, no coordinator present. I was here from 9 light a.m. to 2 p.m. Total Vantage billing I could account for, somewhere north of $53,000. I didn't have the full picture yet, but I had enough. I paid $250 to spend an hour with an elder law attorney in the next town over. She was in her late 50s, brisk, and had clearly heard worse. She looked at my documents for 7 minutes, then looked at me. This is a clean fact pattern, she said, and you can't do anything with it directly. She explained it the way I should have anticipated. I wasn't the account holder. Any legal action had to originate from my father, and if Giselle and Trent sensed trouble too early, assets could move fast. You need the money back before you need them punished, she said. Civil pressure gets the money. Prosecution gets the headline. Figure out which one your mother needs first. I drove home past the spot on Route 12, where the Brown County cabin turnoff used to be marked. I sat in my driveway doing arithmetic. Every calculation ran through one person, my father. The quiet man who had said, "I'll look into it and not yet, and until they're sitting in my house." Either he had been asleep for 2 years, or something was already in motion that I hadn't been invited into. That night I stopped waiting for an invitation. I built my case the way I build a file, methodical, sequential, nothing assumed. I printed what I had, tabbed the key lines, wrote a plain English summary on top. What was taken, when, by whom, what Mom needed within the month. Then I sat in my car outside my own duplex, because there was one thing that could still stop me. My father's face that winter, thinner than last year. Something held back behind his eyes that I'd been chalking up to the weight of caregiving. If I put this folder in front of a 65-year-old man and the weight of it broke him, keeping the peace would be the last thing I ever did for this family. I sat with that for 15 minutes. Then I thought about a police officer's voice at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, and I started the engine. His study light was on when I pulled up. Past 10. I let myself in through the back, past Mom's door alarm, and stood in the hallway with my folder. I could hear paper moving, a drawer closing. The particular creak of his desk chair. I knocked and he said, "Come in, Veda," before the sound had time to reach him. I talked for 12 minutes without interruption. Vantage Home Care Partners. The LLC filing. 11 days cross-referenced against my log. The $53,000 I could account for, and the gap I couldn't yet see. When I stopped, my father took his glasses off, cleaned them with his shirt hem, and said very evenly, $53,400. Like he was correcting a figure I'd rounded wrong. There's also an outgoing transfer from 8 months ago, $110,000 to an entity attached to Trent's development company, and $30,000 last month. He stood up, he took a key from his breast pocket and unlocked the oak cabinet. 3 shelves. Labeled folders. Every statement going back to the first month after the fund was opened. The LLC registration, printed and dated before I'd found it. A timeline in his precise block handwriting. And I saw my own name on a sticky note, next to a copy of one of my care log entries, a date I'd mentioned to him casually over the phone, that I'd filed away and forgotten. He had been building the same case, with better access and more patience, for almost 2 years. I knew at the third invoice, he said. The first looked like an error, the second looked intentional. After that, every month they billed, the file got thicker. Cut them off early and you lose the documentation. Let it run and you build something that holds. He tapped the cabinet door. A surgeon writes everything down. I asked him the only question left. Why now? He sat back down and told me about the cardiology appointment in October and the follow-up in December and the phrase the doctor had used, significant heart failure, progressive, not years, months, on the longer end. He almost smiled. They're coming to us, he said. Good timing. The next morning we drove together to see Audra Finn, elder law attorney, 61, a handshake that meant business. I was the last one to arrive at a meeting already in progress. The will had been redrawn. The fund's remaining balance had been moved into a new account in my father's name and mine. Done legally as the sole account holder, making a transfer. A demand package sat on Audra's desk, civil complaint ready behind it, criminal referral behind that. Like instruments laid out in the order you'd reach for them. We hold everything, Audra said, until they're in a room. Paper panics people. Rooms concentrate them. Then my father turned to me, off script, and asked what I wanted. Not for my mother. He said he knew what she needed, it was in the file. For me. What did I want? I opened my mouth and nothing organized came out. He just waited. He was still waiting when we left. They arrived on a Thursday, a day early. I'm convinced now it was deliberate. Come early, catch us soft, before whatever we've prepared is fully in position. Giselle swept through the front door the way she enters every room. Like the lighting had been waiting on her. Real estate hugs for everyone. The kind where only the shoulders actually touch. When she got to me, she stepped back and gave me the look, the one I'd been receiving my whole life, the one that measured and found insufficient. Still living at home, Veda? I figured you'd have moved on by now. Trent came in behind her, easy as always, laughing at the wallpaper, laughing at the kitchen curtains, landing on me with that comfortable smile. You look tired, babe. He caught himself, or he didn't. It landed the same way either way, I said. Welcome home. My voice came out level. 12 years of depositions will do that to you. My hands did not shake. I want that on the record. What happened next didn't come from any plan. My mother walked in from the hallway in her blue cardigan, fresh from her afternoon rest, and stopped in front of this beautifully dressed stranger. She studied Giselle the way she studies new things now, careful, a little wondering. Are you the one who brings the pastry? Just that. Not Giselle, not sweetheart. Are you the one who brings the pastry? Giselle's smile held its shape while everything behind it quietly left the building. Mom. It's me. It's Giselle. My mother nodded, very gracious, and patted her arm the way she pats strangers she likes. Oh, Veda brings the pastry on Tuesdays. And she walked past her firstborn to ask me whether the bakery on Elm still had the lemon ones, because she thought she'd like one today. You could hear the kitchen clock. My father, at the head of the table, watched all of it with his hands folded, and his face like a closed file. Dinner was pot roast and theater. Trent waited until the dishes were cleared to produce a leather portfolio. I have never understood why they always bring portfolios. And the two of them ran through what I can only describe as a rehearsed duet. I could hear the preparation in it the way you hear it in a pharmaceutical ad. The house, Trent explained, was a lot for a man Dad's age to manage. Mom's needs were increasing. The smart move was to sell now while the market cooperated. She would transition to a well-run community outside Chicago. He slid a brochure across. The cover was a beige hallway, half the cost of these boutique Indiana places, and they'd be right there to oversee everything. And the equity from the house, this was where Giselle came in on Harmony, would go into a family investment vehicle managed through Trent's holding company. Keeping everything together, she said, the way family should. She turned to me, one hand pressed to her chest. Veda, you've been amazing, truly. But you're exhausted. Exhausted people make emotional decisions. I watched my father listen to all of it with his hands folded, nodding gently, the picture of a tired man being managed. Then he asked his questions, soft as gauze. That community, outside Chicago, what's their overnight staff ratio? Trent didn't know, and this investment vehicle, who provides oversight? Something with the word proprietary in it. One more. What's Vantage Home Care Partners billing for coordination services these days? Rates go up, I imagine. Giselle's radiant, didn't even pause. Everything's gone up, Daddy, that's just how it is. My father nodded once. Yes, he said, I've been tracking that. He folded his napkin the way he must have removed surgical gloves for 30 years. Then he stood up. Good. You're both here. He set the folder on the table. Not a slam. A placement. 2 years of statements from your mother's care fund. Vantage Home Care Partners. Care coordination, respite services, in-home assessment. $53,400 across 20 months. Billed for services on days when the only person in this house was Veda. I have her log. I have mine. They agree to the hour. He turned a page with one finger. Vantage Home Care Partners, LLC. Registered in Illinois 20 months ago. Managing member, Giselle Hollis. My sister's face did something I had never seen it do. It stopped performing. 8 months ago, he continued, same level voice, $110,000 left that account as a real estate investment allocation. It landed in an entity attached to Trent Hollis Properties. Last month, $30,000 more. What remains in your mother's care fund as of this week is approximately $4,000. He looked at them the way he must have looked at 10,000 difficult scans over a career. You took nearly $200,000 from a woman who can no longer reliably remember what year it is. You counted on no one checking carefully enough. You forgot whose daughter she is. A pause. A surgeon writes everything down. Trent stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. I've watched lawyers do this in depositions. It never works. He cycled through his settings fast. Technical first. Management fees are industry standard. Coordination is a recognized expense category. You're reading raw numbers without context. My father slid my care log across. 11 dates highlighted and said, "Here's the context." Then sacrificial. Trent took half a step sideways from his own wife. The LLC was Giselle's project. I assumed she was running actual services. If the invoices were irregular, that's. My sister's head turned toward him slowly, like a door coming off one hinge. 20 years of being the chosen one, and the man she'd burned everything down for was reassuring her as the liability. Then Trent found the third setting, and he found it fast. Voice dropping into the register he probably thought of as courtroom. "Think carefully, Holt. You want to spend whatever time you have left in litigation? Push this, and I'll tie the estate up for years." Competency challenges, undue influence claims against her. A gesture toward me, no eye contact. "I know how these judges work. Carol will be in a county bed on Medicaid before you see a dime back." There it was. The beige hallway had always been the plan. Giselle made one last reach for the old music. "Daddy, this is a misunderstanding. We would never." And my father looked at her with something so much quieter and more devastating than anger. Inventory. "The will was redrawn last Tuesday," he said. "Witnessed, notarized, filed with Audra Finn. The demand package is on her desk. Whether the next step is civil or criminal has not yet been determined." Trent said, "By whom?" And then my father did the one thing I hadn't seen coming. He turned to me. "I assembled the record," he said, but his eyes were on mine. "I'm the account holder, and I'll sign what needs signing. But I'm not the one who was engaged to someone and then billed for the privilege of watching it unravel. And I won't be here for most of what comes next. So it's Veda's call. All of it. The civil complaint, the criminal referral, the real estate licensure board. Whatever mercy looks like, if any is asked for. And the will. As written, everything comes to Veda. If she wants it built differently, we build it differently while I can still sign." The silence had weight. Giselle was looking at me, and I watched the exact second she understood something that had never once been true in the history of our family. Her little sister was holding the scoreboard. The pressure started before I got home. Trent by text. "Let's handle this like adults. Full repayment, quiet terms, signed this week. I know people in Ohio bar circles, Veda. Real estate law is a small world." I screenshotted it into my log out of pure habit and did not reply. At 11 that night, a knock at my duplex. Giselle alone in the porch light. No makeup, hair loose. I had not seen my sister's unguarded face in years. Maybe she hadn't either. "Take the money," she said, no greeting. "Whatever's left. Take the house, take the will, I'll sign anything. But don't file on Trent's license. The development company is already under. If his license goes." She stopped. "He's all I built the last 4 years around. Without this, what am I?" I asked her quietly why she'd done any of it. She looked at the porch light for a long moment, and then she told the truth, maybe for the first time since before she could remember auditioning for it. "I left because I thought he'd take me somewhere," she said. And she meant it literally, and she meant it about her whole life. "You always knew you were enough where you were. I never figured that out." She never said she was sorry. Not for Trent. Not for the money. Not for any of it. I told her goodnight, and closed the door, and sat on my kitchen floor, with the weight of a choice I hadn't asked for. I didn't sleep. At 6 I drove to my parents' house because it was, technically, a Tuesday. Mom was up with the birds. I got out the pastry I'd picked up on the way, not Elm Street Bakery but close enough. We sat at the kitchen table, and I helped her with her cardigan buttons, and she hummed something I didn't recognize, something from before I existed. And somewhere in that ordinary Tuesday morning, my hands went quiet and I stopped rehearsing. Here's what I understood at that table, and I'll say it plainly, because it cost enough to learn. If I took the thing they were suddenly offering, sole heir, avenging daughter, the sister who finally won in the end, I would have the thing I'd been hungry for since I was 9 years old, and it would just prove the scoreboard right. One girl seen. One girl useful. Everybody keeping count forever. My mother didn't need a winner. She needed the window with the courtyard maple. She needed Tuesday. She had held on to exactly one fact when everything else started letting go. Someone comes with pastry on Tuesdays. That's the whole game right there. My mother looked up and caught my eye and said, "Tuesday, girl." And I said, "That's me," and I finished helping her with her buttons. At 8, I called Audra Finn's office. I knew what I was doing, set the room for Thursday. Thursday, 10 in the morning, Audra's conference table, bad coffee. My father to my left. The two of them across from us with a Chicago attorney who kept glancing at his own phone. I have drafted briefs in rooms where the outcome mattered enormously, and I am telling you I have never needed steady hands more. I went down the list like a case summary. 1. Repayment, $193,400. Full Vantage billing plus both transfers. You'll sign a confession of judgment today. Miss one payment and it files itself at the courthouse automatically. No discovery, no delays, no room to negotiate. Sign now, or the civil complaint and the complete criminal referral packet go out by close of business. The Chicago attorney started reading very quickly. 2. The estate. I looked at my father. Because we had talked through this at his desk the night before, and when I told him what I wanted, he put his hand over mine for about 5 seconds, which for Holt Marsh is the equivalent of a standing ovation. The will as drafted leaves everything to me. I'd asked him to redraw it. Everything. The house, the pension remainder, whatever we recovered, goes into an irrevocable trust for the care of Rowena Marsh. Professional trustee, Audra supervising. No one in this family holds money over another one ever again. Giselle made a small sound. I didn't look up. 3. The trust establishes a paid caregiver agreement. Market rate, taxes withheld, respite coverage written in. Turns out cooked care coordination is a real job when a real person does it. The first person the agreement covers is Rosa. The second is me. Trent's attorney whispered something. Trent stared at the confession of judgment. He signed. His pen tore the paper a little. Giselle signed without reading, which was somehow the saddest thing in the room. Then I set down the last document. 4, I said, and slid it across facing them. State Real Estate Licensure Board complaint form, filled out in my handwriting. Trent had signed as a professional financial advisor on the care fund's original structure, and he had been CC'd on every quarterly summary Giselle sent to my father. Including 3 that contained Vantage invoices he had specifically approved in writing as legitimate professional services. He had signed documents attesting to the validity of expenses he knew had never been rendered on behalf of a cognitively impaired client he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. This isn't a negotiation, I said. There's no version where I unsee a document I helped draft the template for. I've been filing honest paperwork for 6 years. I don't stop because the file has my family in it. Giselle came out of her chair. You're doing this to win, she said, and her voice broke on the last word, and that was the most real thing she'd said at that table. You finally get to be the one they pick, and you're going to stand there and call it principal. I said her name. Just that. Quietly, and quiet was a register our family had never used on Giselle, so it landed. I stopped keeping score. She stood there with her mouth open, a woman whose entire operating system had just been handed a sentence it couldn't parse. I'm not going to hate you, I said, and I was surprised to find it wasn't hard to mean. I'm not going to follow your life or tell this town your story. And I'm not coming to Chicago. Those are all the same decision. I picked up my folder and walked out. In the hallway, my father was waiting, leaning against the wall, the way he leans when he's deliberately taking the weight off one shoulder. He looked smaller than he had at the table. The table had been running on borrowed voltage. We stood there while the copier hummed somewhere in the back of Audra's office, and my father looked at me the way he looks at things he intends to remember. I got something wrong, he said, which from Holt Marsh is a cathedral statement. I thought the file was the protection. 2 years I kept records so no one could argue. But sitting in there, I watched you set down the sword when you had every right to swing it and build your mother something solid instead. I've been keeping the wrong ledger the whole time. He put his hand on my shoulder, and it had a small tremor now. Not Parkinson's, just time. And neither of us mentioned it. Every Tuesday, every flag you brought me, all of it is dated in that cabinet. I just never once said it out loud, and that was the error in my chart. I had spent 30 years being the daughter with no needs. The one who was useful and therefore fine. 30 years of never asking this man for anything. So what came out of my mouth surprised us both. Teach me the pie crust, I said. The one Grandma made. While there's time. My father laughed, actually laughed, in the hallway of an elder law office, and the sound was so unfamiliar and so completely right that I had to look somewhere else for a second. Sunday, he said, bring a notebook. A surgeon writes everything down. We had 11 more Sundays. I know that sounds like not enough. I'm telling you it was more than I ever thought to ask for. Here is where everything landed. My mother moved into Greenbrier on the 14th, into the room with the courtyard maple, and the trust that pays for it answers to no one's dinner table politics and no one's mood. The repayment schedule runs on automatic. Audra made sure of the wire dates personally, because the alternative files itself at the courthouse, and Trent Hollis has finally met a document he cannot charm up his way around. My deposit came back in the first distribution. Line item 1, Audra called it, like it was obvious. The real estate licensure board took 9 months. Trent's license was suspended pending review of his fiduciary conduct on 3 separate client matters that the investigation surfaced. Matters that had nothing to do with our family, which told me something about how long patterns run before anyone looks. The suspension is public record. The development company restructured. I heard the Chicago condo sold, the way you hear things in a small town, sideways, at the hardware store. My father died at home in March, in his own bed, holding my mother's hand. She didn't know his name by then, but she knew he was hers to be gentle with, and she was. And if you ask me what mercy the whole long story gave us, it's that his last inventory was her hand and not a courtroom. Giselle sent flowers to the funeral home. The card said, I'm sorry. 2 words. It was the most honest thing my sister had ever sent me, and I've decided to let it be what it is, a scoreboard, retired. As for me, I still work at the same firm, but the caregiver agreement pays me now for Tuesdays and the Friday mornings that used to be invisible. The first time a paycheck arrived with that work on the stub, I sat in my car in the Greenbrier parking lot and looked at it for a long while. Rosa is back, Mondays and Fridays. In May, I took 4 days off and drove up to Brown County. Not where the cabin used to be, just the lake. And on the 3rd morning I realized I was sitting there waiting for my phone to ring and it wasn't going to. By the 4th morning I'd stopped waiting. That's the whole prize, if you want to know what it looks like from the inside. Nobody chose me in the end. I stopped auditioning. Those were never the same door. If I could leave one thing for every person doing the invisible work in their family, it would be this: put it in writing. A caregiver agreement, real wages, real days off, before someone else puts their name on what you've been doing for years. And check on your quiet fathers. Some of them have been writing everything down, waiting for exactly the right moment to hand you the file.